Hello you lot. Now today is the day where I answer all your questions. Last week I opened up the Ask Me Anything box and you guys put a bunch of questions in it, and I was quite overwhelmed again with the amount of questions that were asked both on Instagram and on my channel. And so now is the time to answer them. So I have in my jug a few questions that I've picked at, well, not at random. They were the most liked questions on Instagram and YouTube, and then a couple of sort of interesting ones from the bottom of the pile. And I'm going to pick them at random. Let's see. My hand's not actually small enough to get in the jug, so that's could be my first problem. Right. Okay, this is from Katie XX, and she says, do you prefer baking the cakes or decorating them? Actually, I really like doing both of those things. There are lots of people out there who either lean towards baking or decorating, but I really enjoy doing fiddly things with my hands, so the decorating's perfect for that. But I also really enjoy the process from beginning to end of baking a cake and then seeing everyone eating it at the end. One of the things I don't like is cutting into one of my cakes. People always ask me to do it at parties and I always freak out. So yeah, I don't like cutting cakes, but I do like baking them and decorating them equally. Okay, this is from UK, it's Emsy Bums. She asks, I really enjoy baking and have friends and family pay me to make them cakes. I just want to know how to get myself out there. Right, well, I would say start yourself a Facebook page or an Instagram page with good pictures. Like, make sure you use good quality pictures of the work that you do because nobody really is interested in kind of blurry, out of frame cakes. And make sure that you put your contact details on there because people need to be able to know how to get in touch with you. So that would be the first thing that I would do. One of the things I did quite early on is get flyers printed just with my logo and what I do and then my number. You could even go so far as to build yourself a website. There's tons of platforms you can use for that. Squarespace is really good. I'm actually using Squarespace right now to build my new website, which will be coming out soon, so I'll give you a shout about that. There's tons of things. I mean, you could just shout around. With flyers, you can leave them around like cafes or community centres. You could even put them through people's doors if you had a lot of time on your hands. Yeah, I'd just say there's plenty of ways to get yourself out there without, you know, spending too much money, and I'd say Facebook and Instagram probably the first places to go. Lisa J. Moose says, how do you avoid the dreaded icing sugar cloud when making large quantities of buttercream? Well, I learnt this the long, hard way. So for the first few years of baking cakes, I was doing it at home, and my mum would constantly be dusting because the icing sugar just gets absolutely everywhere. It'd be up the stairs, it'd be on the first floor. And then I had a bright spark one day and put a tea towel over the mixer as I was mixing it. I just sort of tucked it around tightly, and that was really, really helpful. And actually now in the big bakery we have a huge planetary mixer. It's got a bowl about this big, and when we dump the icing sugar in, we kind of wrap it in tea towels and aprons and then we turn it on, and it doesn't completely solve the problem, but it does make it much less dusty. So try that. Who has been your tattoo artist? And that is asked by Eleanor Barbieri. I've been tattooed by quite a lot of people. But the last few tattoos I've had done, including this one and this one, so these ones were done by a guy called Kola Hari, who is at the Circle in Soho. He's lovely and he's super quick, and he does these really lovely thick line pictures. And I've also been tattooed by Nick Horn. He's done a lot of my birds, and he is at Good Times in Shoreditch. And most of my work, like my big princess, goddess, my hummingbirds and all of this stuff, and my sugar skulls, they were done by Saira Hanjan, who used to work at Good Times as well, but she's kind of semi-retired and she lives in Wales now, so it's not quite as easy to go and see her. But yeah, I'm super lucky. I've had some really great people work on me. Ooh, what is your secret to baking your cupcakes so perfectly flat on top? That's from Tom Yates. Well, thank you very much, Tom, for noticing my flat tops. If you're not getting flat tops on your cakes, it's probably that the first thing I would say is your oven might be too high, and you should just drop it down a few degrees and try again. What happens if you've got too high a temperature in your oven? The heat will get to the baking soda first and kind of make it peak, and then it'll kind of create a crust, so you get that kind of volcano thing happening, and then it'll sink, so you end up with a kind of like bump right in the middle, and nobody likes that. So I would say either your temperature in your oven is not as advertised and you should just try knocking it down just a couple of degrees. You might be maybe putting a little bit too much raising agent, like baking powder or baking soda. Try just really leveling off the spoon, or maybe putting a tiny bit less than a teaspoon in. And make sure you follow the recipe really, really well. Like all my recipes, I'm quite sort of exact about what I do. You know, I give you the timings to mix them and stuff like that. And I understand if you don't have a freestanding mixer and you're doing it with a hand whisk or like with a wooden spoon, obviously that can vary quite a bit, but have a look at what the batter's supposed to look like and just aim for that. Okay. What do you like the most and least about baking? And that is by Nina Versek. So the thing I like most about baking is kind of eating the cupcakes and the cakes that I make. I really like making ridiculous, delicious things, and my favourite bit is when other people eat them and think they're great. And the worst thing about baking is the washing up. I mean, the kitchen looks quite tidy right now, but usually when I'm baking and testing recipes, the place is an absolute tip. And I have to do all my own washing up at home. Obviously at work, the team kind of split those jobs, but yeah, washing up, just endless washing up. That is definitely the worst thing. Ooh, so lots of people ask, this isn't one particular person, I had a lot of people asking if I would be doing a new book. There are no plans yet to do a new book, but if you haven't already got my book, it is called The Cake Book. It is called The Cake Book, and it is looking like this, and you can buy it on my website, and the link to that is down below in the description box. You can also get it on Amazon if you want. If you live sort of in a crazy place, it's difficult to get to, it might be better to do it that way. But there's 50 recipes in here, and lots of lovely, lovely pictures. Some pictures of me, which I just cringe at. But yeah, no plans as yet to have another book, but never say never. Any tips on transporting and storing cakes? And that is from Blackberry Cakes, who I'm assuming is a baker, him or herself. So storing cakes, make sure you use airtight containers. There is no point in putting them in cardboard boxes. They're going to dry out like that. Make sure you use big Tupperwares. You can get like really big Tupperwares online. Just do a search for like large airtight container or something like that. Keep them flat, and also when they're decorated, do not stack your cupcakes. One of my scariest things is when I see people displaying them one on top of the other when the icing's already on them. So don't only ever do one layer. Don't freeze them. Some people do freeze them. I find it a little bit gross. I think you get that unmistakable flavour of freezer when you eat them, and they do tend to be a little bit drier. And if you're transporting them, make sure they're nice and flat. So if they're in the car, put them in the boot or the trunk, not on the front seat, because the seats in the cars tend to be a little bit like that. Put them in the boot and get some non-slip matting so that they don't kind of slide around. I've had before I got that, I had a few sort of slidey things happening in the van, in the car when I first started out, and sort of smushed cupcakes. So yeah, make sure you get some non-slip matting. I mean, I can't get my hand in. Okay. Please share pictures of your very first cakes and cupcakes that you made, and that is from Yukoya Abdul Halim. Thank you. I will show you some cakes that I made when I first started out, and pictures of my market stall. So this is a good 11 or 12 years ago, and my style of decorating cakes was, slightly different, and my market stall was very, very different to the look that Crumbs and Doilies has now. It was very twee and lots of kind of lace and doilies and stuff. But I used to make everything by hand and decorate everything by hand. I didn't pipe any cupcakes. You see me piping cupcakes now because it's much quicker and easier because we're doing lots more cakes. But back in the day when it was just little old me and a handful of customers, I would do everything by hand. The look and feel of both the cakes and Crumbs and Doilies have kind of evolved over the years to what we are now. And yeah, my style was a lot more different back in the day. Evie Jean asks, do you enjoy cooking when you're not baking? Yes, I love cooking. I am always making my food from scratch. I find it really therapeutic. And I love eating, so obviously cooking helps. I really love cooking. I've got tons and tons of recipe books. One of my favourite things to cook is risotto, because I love eating it so much, and I like stirring. A lot of people really get bummed out by making risotto because it takes so long and you have to stand there and stir it for ages, but I actually really like that. Yeah, so I do love cooking when I'm not baking. Thanks for asking, Eugene. Could you show us your hot boyfriend, Hazel says. No, sorry, he's not here, and he's quite sort of shy about being on YouTube. He's kind of categorically said no. So I'm afraid he's going to have to remain a mystery man to you, but rest assured, he is very hot. Ooh, this is a bit of a heavy one, Jill Jones. Jill asks, what is the process of owning a bakery? I mean, there are many, many, many steps to the process of owning a bakery, some of which are completely necessary, some of which are optional. And I did kind of answer a similar question to this on my previous video, so if you haven't watched that, check that out. But what I would say to start with, if you're thinking about, starting any kind of food business, but baking obviously, get yourself registered with your local authority. I can only speak for the UK because I don't know anything about the regulations in other countries, but it is really super important to register your kitchen or your home or your premises with your local authority. And what that means is you have to just register it as a food business. If you go online to the government website, you can find the form there and you just basically register it. And then you get a little thing saying this is registered a food business, and then you get visited by the environmental health officer. So it's really, really important to make sure that you know what to do. And for that reason, I highly recommend you do a food hygiene course. There's various different levels, but the basic food hygiene is essential because you definitely don't want to be making people sick. And obviously when you're at home, things can get a little bit like lazy, and you know, it's really important to know how to store your ingredients and how long you can keep things for. And a lot of it is common sense, but a lot of it is stuff that you might not necessarily know. So I recommend doing that. There's tons of courses you can do online or in person, and then you get like a certificate. And a lot of people won't even let you trade if you don't have one of those. Again, similarly, you won't be allowed to trade if you haven't got public liability insurance. That's really, really important, because even though it's mega unlikely that you will make someone sick with your cakes, in the unlikely event that you do, make sure you're covered. Public liability insurance isn't that expensive, and it will cover you if the worst happens. Aside from that, I mean, make sure that you're making a product that is going to make you a profit. Don't make stuff that you can only sell for 50p and that you can only sell 10 a day. You know, make sure you're making something that's going to make you money, and make sure you can afford it. Afford the rent if you're renting outside premises, kitchen or a shop or something like that, because it can get incredibly expensive. You know, there's extra costs like business rates that a lot of people don't really know about. You know, refuse, stuff like that. So just make sure you can afford it. Make sure you're producing a product that is going to allow you to afford that sort of thing. So there, like, I mean, that is literally a grain of rice and a sea of rice that of the things that you need to do to own a bakery. So yeah, I mean, I hope that helps, but there's tons of things you need to know. You always say to use good quality chocolate. What brands of chocolate do you recommend? Dark milk and white. And that is from Samantha Meller. So obviously, being a professional bakery, I have access to all the good stuff. And in the bakery we use Calabo and Valrhona, and that is really, really good quality chocolate. But I do understand that stuff's not as easy to come by if you're just an average Joe, just going to the supermarket. So in terms of supermarket stuff, I can only speak from the British side of things. Lindt is very, very easy to come by. It's in most supermarkets, convenience stores, newsagents, you can get that pretty much anywhere. And it's pretty good stuff. And there's a really good range. The white milk and dark chocolate are all totally fine to use. They're not too sugary, which is good. Things like Dairy Milk, Bourneville and Milky Bar they're not proper chocolate. Like, they've got so much sugar and emulsifiers in them. You want to use something like proper. And I like Valrhona. You can get that in some supermarkets. It's a lot more expensive. If you are lucky enough to have that in your area, in your supermarket, then please use it because it is so lush. Then a middle range is Green and Blacks, which is an organic chocolate. The milk and the dark chocolate are really nice. I'm not a massive fan of the white chocolate because they put too much vanilla in, I think, but you can use Lindt for that. I hope that helps. Running out of questions and I can't get my hand in. Ooh, a lot of people asked about self-raising flour. Now, I know that some of you out there in the world don't have access to what we have over here in Britain, which is self-raising flour. We're super lucky in that respect. I think America has self-rising flour, which is basically the same thing. Yeah, a lot of you have said that you don't have access to self-raising flour. How can you bake my cakes? Well, it's very, very simple. You can do it using regular all-purpose or plain flour, and for every 150 grams of plain flour, add 2 level teaspoons of baking powder. And I've actually done a bit of an experiment with this. Now, in these trays are 2 lots of cupcakes that I made this morning. You can see they're pretty similar. This one here in the grey tray is made with the aforementioned mixture of plain flour and baking powder. So because my recipe for cupcakes asks for 125 grams of flour, I put in just over 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder, and they came out just fine. They're nice and flat, so this kind of harks back to the question about flat tops, so it's a good one. But my preferred cake really is the self-raising flour, because as you can see, they're slightly domed, which I just really like. I just find it more attractive. Now let's have a look and see what they are saying inside, because the crumb of it might be slightly different. No, the one with the plain flour, it's got a nice crumb on it. I'm going to eat it and see if it tastes nice too. Tastes pretty good. Tastes like a cupcake. Tastes like one of my cupcakes, which is nice. And then this one, which is my regular, also really nice crumb, nice and springy. Flavour-wise, delicious. So the only difference is a slightly more rounded top on the ones with the bicarbonate of soda and the self-raising flour versus the one with plain flour and the baking powder. So there you go. Ooh, oh, loads of people ask me this. What was your biggest baking disaster? And that is from Night Air. That's a very mysterious name. Well, what is the biggest disaster? I mean, I've had loads and loads of little disasters, like, you know, things falling off cakes sort of falling over, and like minor repair. So a couple of times, I'd be driving the cake around and I'd deliver it, and I'd open the door and it'd be a really hot sunny day, and like, you know, the top tier would have slid off the bottom tier, and my partner Sam would have had to cycle to meet me with some baking and decorating equipment, and I'd have to patch it up in the van. And we've had to do that a couple of times, but really nothing major. The only really major disaster I can think of was one time years and years ago, a TV production company asked us to produce a cupcake which was like dynamite flavoured. So I made a spicy chocolate sponge with marshmallowy meringue icing, which had popping candy inside, and then stuck on the top was coconut, lime and chilli brittle, which all sounds delicious, right? And it was delicious. However, obviously when chilli gets hot, the fumes go crazy, and we were filming it in the kitchen, and I put the chilli into the brittle, and within seconds, the entire room was choking and coughing, and like we had to open all the windows. I couldn't speak because I don't know if you've ever had chilli kind of air stuck in your throat, but it is really hard to speak. And that went on for about half an hour. So that was probably the most unpleasant disaster. Everyone was choking and I felt really bad, but it was quite funny. Various people asked me for tips to coming up with recipes. I always tell you to experiment. Like, I don't think that you should be hemmed in by a recipe. If you think that a recipe would be better with this ingredient over that ingredient, then you just go ahead and try it. And once you have a kind of back catalogue or an arsenal of recipes under your sleeve, you can start mixing and matching, and that's kind of what I do. So obviously 12 years of baking cupcakes, I've made my fair share of different flavoured sponges and buttercreams and fillings and custards and creams and yada yada yada. And at some point you say, oh, I wonder what this would be like with that from that cupcake. So experiment, mix things up and just trial and error it. I do get a lot of people commenting after my videos saying, but I don't like peanuts, can I use some other kind of nut? Or I don't like bananas, can I leave it out, or whatever? And what I would always say is, yes, just try it. Like, just try it. Because you might create, in doing so, you might create something absolutely knockout that no one's ever heard of before. So just experiment. Ooh, will you think about opening a Crumbs and Doilies outside of London? Edinburgh, please. Subtle, blossoming XX. Well, we've got no plans to open another shop outside of London, unfortunately for you, Blossoming, and anyone else who asked that question. We are a London-based company and we love London, so we're really, really happy here. Which isn't to say that we wouldn't consider it one day, and if anyone wanted me to open a shop in New York and pay for me to move there, then I would happily do that. But at the moment, London is where it's at, people, so you've got to come to us. Sorry. Ooh, do you have any tips for coloured white chocolate drips? And that's from Sally Bakes Cakes, who presumably bakes cakes. I do have a tip. Use Americolour oil-based colouring. It's really, really good for colouring white chocolate. Some of it is better than others. Like, there are some colours, like red, for example, makes it stiffen up and so makes it not drip as well. But there are a lot of the colours in the range that work really, really well. And also you can add a little drop of like vegetable oil, but what that will do, while it will keep it runny, it won't allow it to set. So it won't be like a nice sort of crust of white chocolate. It'll be kind of still a little bit wet. Or you could try using cocoa butter. Sometimes at the kitchen we add just a few little nuggets of cocoa butter, and what that does is it just helps loosen up the chocolate and still allows it to set well. So that would be my tip. I am running out of questions. Right. What is your go-to dessert to make if you're hosting dinner or bringing dessert to a friend's place? And that is from Cupcakes WPG. Sorry, Cupcakes WPG. Well, I am actually quite well known for forgetting to bring dessert or make dessert for parties. I think because I'm just surrounded by it all the time. So just when I get home, it just doesn't even occur to me a lot of the time. But when I do remember, normally it's too late and I just have to run to my shop to go and buy whatever they've got left. Well, I don't have to buy it. Don't tell anyone, but I get the cakes for free. But if I do remember, one of the things I've made quite a bit is my cookie dough cheesecake. And if you haven't seen that video, do check it out. It is so tasty and it's really easy. And you can do it. You can probably get it done in like a few hours if you're really at a pinch. So yeah, that's a good one for a dessert dinner party because it will serve about 10 to 12 people. But yeah, normally I just cheat and go to my shop. So few left. This is very exciting. Various people asked me if I would give you guys an eyeliner tutorial. I mean, I could do, I suppose. You really interested in my eyeliner? Yeah, I mean, I'm not wearing any today, but as you probably know, I like to wear eyeliner and I've been doing it for a long time, so maybe I do it a certain way that you guys would like to know about. If you really do want me to do one, please put it in the comments box below and I will think about doing a tutorial. What do you watch on Netflix? From Mrs. Clifford. Very formal. Well, I really love pretty much everything by Marvel, so I've watched all the Marvel series. I didn't really get into Iron Fist, so I kind of abandoned that after about 4 episodes. Sorry. But at the moment I'm watching Game of Thrones because I'm actually watching season 6 because I missed season 5 and 6. So for the last week I've been watching 5 and 6 so that I can catch up with the rest of the world and watch season 7 before people give away. Oh, my dog's coming in. Someone gives away some kind of secret. Curtis has recently injured himself, so he's kind of limping around. You're confused, aren't you, because I've moved your bowl? Let me go and get it for you. It's here, mate. It's here. Here it is. Poor little thing's got a bandage on. What else? My favourite things from last year were the OA and Stranger Things. The OA I watched in the whole series in like 2 or 3 days over Christmas, and started off being a bit like, not really sure where this is going. And then by the end of it, like, you know, I'm so emotional, and my boyfriend and I were devastated when it ended. And Stranger Things was so good, and I cannot wait for the next one. And also, if I'm feeling a little bit like, oh, I don't really know what to watch, I always go for Arrested Development because it is so funny. Oh my gosh, last question. This is so exciting. Oh, really randomly, this is the one that got the most likes. So this is the most popular question. This is the one that you guys want me to answer the most. And it is, what's the hardest thing you've ever had to bake? And that is from Zach Robinson. And over 1,200 people like this question, so it's obviously on your minds a lot. At the moment, I am really struggling with Japanese cotton cheesecake. Because I really want to show you guys how to make it, because it's so good and it's so tasty and it looks wicked and it's just really awesome. But it's surprisingly so hard to get really perfect, because it has to have that nice kind of plump top with no cracks at all, just to kind of like, I mean, it's plump. It's like, it reminds me of a little baby's bottom. And you have to get just the balance of like moisture and heat and time and cooling down just right to make that happen, to make it rise up in such a way that it doesn't split the cake. So I've struggled with that. I've made about 8 now, and I think I'm nearly there. So hold tight, guys. I'm gonna have a Japanese cotton cheesecake recipe for you very soon. And the only other thing I can think of is, back in the day, one of the first like really big cakes that we made at Crumbs Doilies was a massive poker table. And I'm not joking, this cake was so big. It was the size of my dining table. It was huge. Heaviest cake known to man. So it was a whole poker table, and Sally and I made it. Sally, who you've seen and met before. We handmade all the chips. We even I hand painted cards. So even, you know, the crazy pattern that's on the back of playing cards, I hand painted that, and hand painted all the little jacks and the queens and whatnot. And then the hardest thing of that whole cake was I had to pipe in royal icing the PokerStars logo in the middle, but because the cake was so big, I had nowhere to lean. Like normally when you pipe or do any kind of writing, you're leaning on something, aren't you? Because you want you want to be supported. I was squeezing it out of a piping bag like this, like over this gigantic, very fragile cake, and having to get it just right, and it was really stressful. But I did it. It just took so long, and it was really satisfying, and the customer loved it. And yeah, I think that's one of my favourite cakes that we've ever made to date. So that's it. That was the hardest cake I've had to make, and that is that. That's all the questions in my jug. So hopefully that has satisfied some of you. If it hasn't, then I may do another one soon. Let me know if you have burning questions that you desperately want me to answer, and maybe I'll do another one of these in a few months' time. I'll be back with another recipe next week, because you guys have been very good allowing me to just waffle on the last couple of weeks. And until then, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, then please do, and tell your friends too as well, because obviously we want to be a big gang, we want to be as big a gang as possible. And please share this video with someone you think might like to watch it, and I will see you next week. Bye.